Hey, what's up everybody? In this video tutorial, we are going to be bringing our eccentric cam in to our automata. And hopefully you've been using the video tutorials before this, and if you've been using them, you can see how we've constructed the box. We've brought in the axle, we've brought in the crank handle peg, the shaft collars, the crank handle peg, the follower rods, and the follower. Oh, don't forget about the guides too. All right, so all that's already in there. Now what we're needing is just to bring our cams in and to get these to behave the way that we want when we actually crank on the crank handle. Just a heads up for this one, if you go out into our course folder, if you go into Automata Resources and come down here and find your Automata Assembly Information Drawings, you're going to be seeing one here called Pair and Eccentric Cam. And then we can scroll down here to the second page. I'm going to be referencing this drawing, okay, for this second video tutorial. All right, so back into Fusion. First things first, what we need to do is, I know I told you to put slider joints, at the end of our video tutorial where we were bringing all the mechanism stuff in. I'm actually going to have you tear those out, okay, and we're going to reset that so we can have a good reference point to make the rest of these numbers work. All right, so I'm going to come up here and find my slider joints. Now, if you're not seeing joints, all you have to do is come next to joints, pick on the fly out, and now you're going to see all the joints that we have used so far. Okay, I'm going to find my two slider joints at the bottom, and I'm going to go ahead and just simply delete those. Okay, once I delete those, I can now grab it by the follower rod. Oops, I know what I did wrong. Let me just fix one thing real quick. Okay, now I can grab them by the follower rod and I can pull those out. All right, and now I can go ahead and kind of reset these with two more slider joints. So before we get to that, if I come down here, all right, you should be able to see two followers. All right, you're just going to come over here and you're going to hit the eyeball, and that's going to be turning off the visibility, okay, for those followers. All right, we're doing that because we want to use the bottom of our follower rods in order to put in a joint between that and the actual top of the guide. So let's do that. Let's go to joint. I'm going to look at the bottom of this follower rod, find the dead center, pick on it, and then here at the top, we're going to come right here to the guide, and we're going to find that dead center and pick on that to place it in. Now we can see that that didn't do the sliding motion that we want, so switch over to our motion tab and let's come over here and find slider, and now we can see that that goes up and down. All right, so that's resting right on top there with the slider joint. All right, so we're going to do the same thing for the second one. All right, we're going to come up here, go to joint, come to the bottom of this follower rod, come up here to the top, get in here close to the guide, and we're going to find that dead center. That's going to come right in. It remembers from last time we were using sliders, so I like it. So I'm going to go ahead and say OK. All right, so now that we have both of those rods in, okay, now what we can do is come out here and turn on our followers. So I'm going to find followers over here. I'm going to turn those back on by making sure that that eyeball is being shown, and we can see that those followers are here. All right, so for this one, we said we were going to be using eccentric. So I'm going to go ahead and just drag eccentric across the line, bring that in, grab it by the grip, pull it up off the origin. And before I get out of here, there's a couple things I want to do. All right, so our eccentric cam, all right, we want to probably use the dial, and we want to just sort of nudge this into the correct position. So I'm going to go with 90 degrees this way, and I want the upper lobe of our eccentric cam to be going straight up. All right, so once that is in, I'm going to go ahead and say OK. All right, so once that's in, now we can come here to joint. I'm going to come right here to this face at the top of the hole, find this joint origin and select it. I'm going to come right over here to the end of our actual axle. I'm going to pick on that. All right, and unfortunately that's not a rigid joint, so I'm going to go ahead and switch that to rigid. So I can see that that is oriented up, okay? It's flush with that surface, we're good to go. But the thing is, we're not gonna get out of this yet. I do wanna come back and look at my position. All right, I'm gonna look at the front, and obviously we can see that this eccentric cam is not below this follower rod. So I'm going to grab it by the arrow. I can see I'm going in a negative direction. Looks like I'm pretty close, but it could be nudged over just a little bit more to the left. So I'm going to come in here. I'm going to change this to like negative 1.55. Get that nudged over. Might be a little bit too far. Let's go with negative 1.525. Looks like that's almost dead center, so I'm going to go ahead and say OK. All right, so our eccentric cam is in, lobe is up, it's directly underneath the follower rod. All right, we are good to go. All right, so now what we have to do is do a little bit of math because we're going to take the follower rod and the follower and we're going to push this down and we're going to be making sure that the follower is making contact with the top of the cam. All right, so that's where this information drawing comes in. We need to know data, we need to know measurements, all right, in order to get it into the correct position. So if you take a look at this drawing, we can see from the top of the box to the actual dead center of the axle is a distance of 2.25. All right, so kind of lock that away and remember that. When we look at the follower, we can see that there's a square hole that's drilled down into the follower, and that is drilled to a depth of 0.25. Over here is just this flat face that comes down a distance of 0.125. All right, and then we can see it goes into an arc and that has a radius of 0.25. So if you're doing a little bit of mental math, you know from the bottom of that to the top, okay, would be a distance of 0.375. All right, so 0.375 from here to here, which means, boy, is that an ugly 0.375, which means we now know, okay, with a little bit of math, what the distance is from the bottom of the hole down to the bottom of that arc. If we took 0.375 and we subtracted 0.25 from it, okay, you guessed it, all right, we have a distance of 0.125. So we have to remember that. Okay, over here on our eccentric cam, if we were to take a look, all right, we know that the distance from the center point up here to the top of the circle is 0.75. We can see that has that radius. Okay, if we took 0.75 and we added 0.375 to it, okay, you're going to be seeing that that is a distance, okay, of 1.125. Okay, so this would be 1.125 from here to here. Okay, and basically what's left over then from the center point of our axle, okay, down to this edge, okay, would be what, 1.5 minus 1.125. That means that that would be a distance of 0.375. All right, so these are all numbers that we're going to be using here in a little bit. I'm just showing you where we're getting them from. All right, so back into Fusion. What I'm going to do is I'm now going to come in here and modify this slider that we see right here. All right, if you ever wondering which slider is which, okay, once you highlight it, I'm not picking on it, I'm just simply just hovering over it. All right, you're going to see that one's going to turn darker on those icons that we see in front of us. So I can see in my case, okay, this is slider 35. So all I have to do is right click on that. And what I'm going to do first is edit the joint. All right, so what I'm going to do is grab the follower rod. I'm just going to pull that down. We can see that that's in a negative direction. So if I took that to negative 2.25, we're going to see that that is going to be dead center, okay, of our actual axle. The thing is, though, is that we now have to start compensating for the thickness of our follower, and we're going to be talking about the larger side, okay, of our eccentric cam since it's pointing up. All right, so what that means is we're going to be adding that distance, okay, that's here at the bottom of the actual follower. Okay, that's 0.125. Okay, so back into Fusion, I'm going to say I want to add to this 0.125, and then I want to add the upper half, okay, of our eccentric cam since it's that top portion that's pointing up. All right, so we said over here, okay, from the hole, okay, to the top is going to be a radius of 0.75 plus our 0.375, which gives us a distance of 1.125. All right, so I'm going to add in here 1.125 to bring that up. Okay, once I've done that, I'm going to go ahead and hit OK, and we should be able to see that follower now is resting on top of the cam. You don't have to do this next portion, but I'm going to just go ahead and do it just to show you. I'm going to come in here and just turn the visibility off on my side. Look at this from my right side view, zoom in here, and we can see that that follower is resting right on top of that eccentric cam. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and just turn that side back on. And now we can go ahead and start figuring out what our joint limits are. Okay, so in this case, we're going to see that, this is starting here on the top. All right, so I'm going to come up here and find which slider this is going to belong to, and I can see that that's slider 5. I'm going to right click and pick on edit joint limits. All right, so the thing is that our rest is going to have to be at the lowest point that it can, okay, on the cam. So I'm going to come in here and go to rest. All right, and what we're going to have to do here is just going to be a little bit of a, just a little bit of math. So right now we're sitting at the top of our cam, which is 1.125. And if we went out there and we subtracted 0.375 from it, we're going to see a distance of 0.75. All right, so if we take a look here, what we're going to do is we're going to take the maximum value that we have, which is this, and we're going to be subtracting the minimum value, which is this. Okay, so that's why it's going to be 1.125 and subtract 0.375 for it to find the difference, which in our case is going to be 0.75. So I'm going to come in here to Fusion, okay, and when I go to say I want to change my rest, I'm going to go in a negative direction down negative 0.75. So we can actually see where that follower rod's at. Okay, with our minimum, what we're going to do is change that, okay, to a negative 0.75 as well. So our minimum is set at negative 0.75 and our rest is sitting at negative 0.75. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and say okay. All right, and now we can see that that's sitting on top. Let's see if the behavior is correct. So if I come up here and go to assemble, I'm going to come down and say I want to enable all contacts. I'm going to flip this just into a home view. Okay, flip this around a little bit where I can see it. And now I'm going to grab this by the handle and start pulling this around. And we can see that that relationship is good. All right, so we have just fully constrained that eccentric cam. Once again, if you want to set this back, okay, to the home view that we started with, okay, all you have to do is come up here to Rev, make sure to come and go to home position, right? It's going to start out, right where you started the entire thing. All right, so there you go. That is how you use joints, use the mathematical data that we have regarding measurements, and apply that all to fully constrain that eccentric cam in your automata.